Yes, folks, it's Thursday, 2 p.m. Pacific. I'm Fred McMurray, which this means it has to be time for
You are muted, lady.
Oh my goodness. Is it Friday yet? No, it's only Friday Eve. It's got to be
I'm
Friday.
just glad it wasn't me, since everybody's constantly pulling on Elizabeth. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I have not been doing that lately. So the baton has been passed.
Well, in all fairness, you have been absent. Hey, welcome to Pillars of Franchising. Woohoo! What are we on, the 28th of 29th? 29th already? What the heck happened to September?
I don't know, but it's going by way too quickly.
It sure is. I'll tell you what's not going by too quickly are all these issues we're having with staffing and all this other fun stuff, huh? Can we just be past that already?
Well, evidently not, because now we're dealing with inflation and recession and all kinds of fun things, which brings us to our word on the street today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we stumbled across this survey, and our friends at IFA and Gallagher and Fran Data had kind of published this all together. It's the 2022 Franchisee Inflation Survey. Mm-hmm. And I think it's hitting every industry a little bit differently. Certainly our industry that Ray and I are in, ours, I can personally say, I feel like we're getting out of the labor shortage, but we're dealing with inflation as it comes to the cost of fuel, which is really big when you have a fleet. Fuel costs, though they've come down significantly in the last couple of weeks, they're still well over what they were a year ago. Right. Mm-hmm. And we still have the inability to get a lot of supplies. So a lot of these issues that we ran into have continued. So
it's the strangest things too. Donald lost his phone, so we had to get a replacement. Can't find a phone case anywhere. Amazon, the Verizon store, nowhere. I mean, it's just the strangest things. So you never know based on industry what people are struggling to get.
Yeah.
But some key findings from this report that are posted on the IFA website, if you're interested in going and looking at the whole entire thing, say that 90% of franchisees are experiencing moderate to substantial inflation impact. Yep. Most impacted sectors are lodging at 90%, QSRs at 83%, and child-related services at 61%. 89% have raised prices of goods and services. Yep. 64% are reported lower earnings due to raises in prices, and QSR restaurants, especially retail stores, beauty. So that's the bad news.
Right. Well,
good news, Kristin. Tell us some good news.
Well, I mean, the good news is if there's some to share, I will say that, not every market is impacted the same. Not every segment, as you mentioned, the top three are still, those are probably the hardest areas of impact. But there are several places in which it's not being impacted. For example, a lot of people right now are in rent. They're in rented buildings, and that's not really a concern right now. Perhaps that's due to the availability of space. So I don't see that to necessarily be a huge issue for folks. I don't think if you look at multi-unit compared to single unit, I think in a lot of ways it's harder for single units to absorb some of these because they don't have multiple businesses to leverage costs across. It's just one. And so I think that tends to be a little bit of a problem. But it is still, compared to having an independently owned business, this is still a great market to be in. Having the support of fellow owners and your franchisor, the really great thing about being a part of a system is that people are finding ways to leverage marketing dollars. For example, here in Chicago, we have marketing co-ops. So to have big market impact is a lot cheaper for all of us in this area because we pool our money together. A lot of times franchisors are able to do corporate buys for the franchisees, which makes it really nice because then, maybe you're getting a big break in how much you're paying for your supplies, whatever that key supply may be that everybody shares. Mm-hmm. So, and those are things that if you have an independent business, you just don't have business partners or, I'll call them brothers and sisters in the franchise family analogy, that you can pull money with. So I think that it's a really good time still to be in franchising. We have had to, as reluctant as I am, have had to raise prices. And surprisingly, a lot of my customers have said, of course you have to. Everybody is, right? Mm-hmm. I mentioned I took my kid to Culver's, one of the favorite franchises that I like to visit. And we had one meal plus an extra order of pretzel bites. And it was $18 just to feed one teenage boy a controlled, like if I let him order himself, he'd order like 3, but just a meal plus extra pretzel bites. And it was $18.
Yeah.
So the costs are everywhere. I think we all have to accept that that's just what's happening right now. And hopefully we get through this relatively soon. But the great news is we got a guest today who is a wealth strategist who's going to help us figure out how to plan for our futures and where to make good investments and things of that nature. So with this, I say we should get on with our guest.
Yeah. And before we do that, I'll just quickly say it while y'all are on screen. If you have questions for our guests or any of our mentors, call us at 323-580-5755. So y'all take it away.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Kristin. So I'd like to introduce you all to Mike Ringel. Ringel or Ringel? I'm sorry.
Ringel's fine.
There we go. Mike Ringel, who is a wealth strategist, financial planner. And we're really excited to have him on today because we know that so much of what goes into starting to have one unit or more than one unit involves finances, right? And you need someone in your corner who can help you process a lot of those decisions and numbers. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and, what kind of clients you tend to work with?
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here and, be able to be a resource for you and all the listeners and, all the business owners. My background is I'm a CPA. I don't practice anymore. I did my time at some of the large firms, Deloitte & Touche, BDO Seidman, and went back to NYU to get my master's. And upon graduating, decided that I didn't want to go back into corporate America.
Right.
Really wanted to do something that made a difference for people. And some friends and I started a company called Let's Talk Business. It was started a little bit earlier. In fact, we had a radio show called Let's Talk Business, all about franchising. And that's where we started. And from there, we started building what we called at the time entrepreneurial support communities. Mm-hmm. So bringing business owners together for them to talk about the different issues and challenges they face in their business. So one of the biggest challenges that we discovered was the issue of isolation. Most entrepreneurs don't have anybody to talk to about what's going on in their business, their problems, their challenges. They can't bring it home to their spouse who really doesn't understand what they're going through. And I facilitated a lot of the groups. We started to franchise it at the time, so we had a few units. Mm-hmm. We actually started working with some major corporations who realized that they are selling their products through entrepreneurs. And if we can help them become better business owners, then they're going to sell more of their products. So we started working with companies like IBM and Avaya and Mitel, really to talk to them about the business. Then in 2004, something happened to us that happens to a lot of businesses, is that we got divorced.
Right. No one tells you that when you're starting up a business with other people, you might go through a business divorce.
We did. And we had 4 partners who had different ideas and directions on how to grow the business. Mm-hmm. And 2 of them went in one direction, one went in another. And I was just able to walk away because neither path was attractive for me. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we talked to them about was, we talked to all the entrepreneurs about, is creating buy-sell agreements.
Right.
As an attorney, you know how important they are.
Absolutely.
When things are good,
Mhm.
and everybody's happy, that's
Mhm.
the best time to put the what ifs down on paper
Mhm.
and to fund them properly. So, what if one of the partners just wants to leave?
Right.
What
That is
if,
an important question. Yeah. I mean, and so many people don't realize that, a lot of the buy sells, when you say, okay, I'm going to have to come up with, half the value of the business, and
right?
maybe that's $500,000. And,
Yeah,
someone's looking at that, it's like, I don't have $500,000 cash,
right.
but they don't realize that this could potentially be funded, right? You're going to tell us with life insurance.
Well, so there are different, right? There are different ways to fund it. So if Laura, if you and I are partners and one of us passes away, right, then we can use life insurance, right, owned by the company, and there are certain ways to structure it such that, if the business is worth, your half is worth $500,000, then $500,000 would come into my financial world, and I would be able to buy your shares from your estate, and everybody's happy. Now, one of the funding mechanisms that most business owners miss is that what if one of us becomes disabled?
Right. That's a big issue, because it's not the same kind of like instant payout. Even if you carry disability insurance, which is costly, but even if you decided to do that, there isn't, an immediate lump sum payment. Typically, it's more monthly, kind of checks.
Right. So you can buy what they call disability buyout insurance.
Oh, look at that.
And which is special. So it's specifically for partners and for business owners who want to have a funding mechanism, because, Laura, if you and I are partners and one of us gets sick, we still each own half the business.
Right. And suddenly, if I'm sick, you're having to carry my weight. Right.
And you're still entitled to your half.
And I'm still entitled to my proceeds. Right.
You are.
And legally, that's a very tricky situation, plus emotionally, but, legally, that's very complicated.
Right. And so the third funding source, could be from the cash flow of the business. And the question is, will the business be able to have enough cash flow,
right,
to be able to buy one of us out? And it's kind of like, if we'll talk a little bit later about how you transition a business, what are the choices you have? And if you transfer to an insider, which could be a partner, there's the possibility of double taxation. Right?
There really is.
So, and a lot of business owners don't know this. So you really need to have any agreement you have reviewed, right, by an attorney like yourself. Need to coordinate with somebody like myself who knows the financial aspects of it. And it has to be done when everyone's happy. Right?
It can be hard to line up all those stars, but it is important to try and do that, because what you're saying makes total sense. That, I have a client recently who's going to make a pretty substantial investment, and there's a group of 3 of them, and they're all best friends, and they're all very excited. And right now they're all very excited, but how this may, I'm not saying it will go badly, but it could. It could. And a lot of life is about evaluating and judging risk and saying, okay, how do I mitigate that? Right. And mitigation in this kind of risk is done through doing a buy-sell agreement. And how do you fund that when everyone is happy, like you said?
Well, and the reason why I say that is there was a law firm that I worked with where the partners weren't happy. And in the middle of they were working on their buy-sell agreement when things weren't going great. And so it just put a tremendous amount of stress on the practice. Now, one of the things that is really important, and it's been fascinating to me, is most business owners, I think it's 98% of business owners, don't know the value of their business.
No, it's absolutely correct. Almost no business owner that I've ever worked with, whether it was my client was selling or my client was buying, there's almost no one who does any kind of consistent valuation or wants to pay for a valuation. And it's important to note as well that, how things are valued, there is no, one truth. Right. It is subjective. It is something where, there may be an approach to valuation, for example, for tax purposes, where, frankly, we all want to minimize value if it's going into your estate, if we're doing gift transfers, for example. However, if we're looking at selling a business, we want to say the value is very high and it's wonderful. And so I think that's another reason that a lot of people, in addition to just not really knowing about how to do, kind of at least back of napkin valuation, there's a lot of confusion out there.
There is. And you brought up some really great points, is that the reason why business owners don't have valuations done on a regular basis, if at all, is because it's typically expensive.
Yep.
It takes a tremendous amount of time away from them working in their business.
Mm-hmm.
And they believe, because it's their baby, it's probably worth more to them, right, than to anyone else.
Right.
And, the example I like to use is I had a 2010 Volvo S80 that I loved. I would pour money into this car. I mean, my wife just wanted to get rid of it. To me, it was worth everything, right? To anybody else, it cost me money. It cost me money to have somebody take it off my driveway. Right?
Right. It costs, exactly. And I think that, and a lot of people, when they're evaluating going into a business or, a franchise opportunity in particular, it's that old saying, from our friend, Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. It may be a relevant question during your due diligence to say, okay, historically, what have the multiples been for sale? Or, how is price determined? If in 10 years I want to sell this business, right? At least let me know today what the multiple would be, because you're not going to get, just 1 year worth of sales. I had that one time where someone just thought that, well, my business, we sold at a gross sales of 1 million last year, so I should get 1 million. It's like, okay, well, you had a lot of expenses. It's not really like a fair picture. So that's just an example. People don't know. But it's really critical to start, kind of at least putting a toe in the water as part of the planning process to say, okay, like food service, retail tends to say, for the most part, in maybe 1, 2, 3x multiples, tech will move up a lot more. Healthcare will move up a lot more. And that's not really surprising when you kind of think about like what are hot industries, right? But if you don't know that, you're about to feel devastated.
And the last thing you want to do is know when you're about to exit your business. So one of the things that I do, I'm what they call a certified exit planner. I've got a designation from an organization out in Colorado where we've studied this. And so one of the first things I do when I work with somebody is there's certain technology that we have to be able to get a good valuation of a business, create a business valuation report along with key performance indicators. And all we really need is 3 years tax return and some current financials. So
and that's really critical. I mean, I'm chair of the Chicago chapter of the Exit Planning Exchange. And so we spend a ton of time talking about issues like this, and, just being able to get even a more basic valuation. I mean, Ray, have you heard from any other owners, or have you thought at all about, how people are valuing things in your industry?
I think that's an interesting topic because, of course, my business to me is worth probably a lot more than I can ever get for it. But that's because I love what I do. And at my particular stage in life, it's a constant reminder of what I should be doing, and whether I should go ahead and sell it or keep it, or right now I enjoy what I'm doing, and that is part-time in the business and managing the people I have, and right now it's working out for me, but there's always that constant thought, what is the business really worth, and would whatever I got for it, would it carry me through to the to my demise?
And that's such an important question. I think that's like the fundamental question that most owners need help with, right? Is can the price that they might get, plus, whatever they have saved, is it enough? Right.
That's right.
Well,
That's a very, what they will do, that'll determine the outcome frequently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Is that something that you guys help with, Mike, at kind of analysis?
That's actually kind of the core work from the exit planning point of view that we do. So what we do is we take a look at, what the entrepreneur has on the personal balance sheet, right? What they have, what they want, like how much income do they want? What is their life going to look like after they exit their business? However they transition it, right? And there are a couple different ways. I mean, I mentioned before, you could transfer it to an insider. That's a partner, employees, there are pluses and minuses of doing that. You could sell to an outsider, or you could just die with the business. I mean, a lot of service companies do that. So what we do is, first thing we do is take a look at what they have on their balance sheet. We take a look at what they want from an income point of view. And then we use this tool that's very similar to, I'm sure you're familiar with Zillow. You can go online. And so using big data and technology that's out there, we can get a pretty good valuation of the business and say, well, if you exited your business today for this amount of money, would that provide enough for you to maintain the lifestyle that you want to live? Now, a lot of people are not ready to exit, but they just need to know the number.
Yep. They need to have some baseline, right?
Right. And if there's a gap, which most people do, right, then we have to figure out, like Ray, you were mentioning, when's the right time to exit?
That's right.
Do you add value? And we call them value drivers. How do you add value to the business to get the valuation up? Right? Because one of the things business owners often forget is that whatever you sell your business, Uncle Sam's coming knocking at the door.
Right. You're basically losing a third or a half. I mean, it is. You're not getting, the 500,000 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I have a client I've been working with to get him exit ready for about 5 years. So I helped him with the financial planning side, which is, helping him protect his financial world. We talked about his personal investing. How do you move money from the business balance sheet to the personal balance sheet in a tax efficient way? Right. And then what happened was somebody came to him and said, I want to buy your business. And we did the planning to say, if you sold it for this amount and you netted this amount, what is your life going to look like going forward? And he got the check he got on the 20th, actually.
Ooh, exciting. Okay.
It was very exciting. And he felt confident to know that he was going to be okay.
Right.
Like, and that's what we want to know.
That's so critical. And I know, you and I having this sort of shared emphasis, right, in our professional lives about exit planning, right? We think that the, more time, like you said, 5 years, right? And for some people, that's like too much time.
Right.
Would you say like 1 year, 2 years, to get ready, if you want to be intentional about it, not just happenstance and like, well, somebody came to me and offered me, this, how do I, if they were really going to actually plan, how much time would you, kind of encourage them to take?
So the day after they start their business,
the day they full time
about the exit. But in all seriousness, if you think about why we go into business, right? Most of us are going in because we have a purpose. It's not just to make money. A lot of times, especially in a lot of businesses, home health care, a lot of people get involved in there where, I have a friend who's a respiratory therapist and the husband's a nurse and they have a purpose in their business. And then other people have purpose to make money, but they want to give to charity or they want to leave it to their kids or they want to exit. So, what in my mind is the best time to plant, I think it's a bonsai tree was 20 years ago.
Yep. A tree is 20 years.
Right.
Second best time is today. Right.
So what I'm thinking is, I like to work with, business owners between, around 3 to 5 years out. Okay. Right. Also business owners who are about to get the biggest check of their life, right? Because they work so hard for it. Make sure that they don't gamble and speculate and lose it.
That's important, right? People think suddenly, well, I got $5 million, it doesn't matter. I can buy that boat. That's,
Right.
I can buy, a place, in the country. I can buy, it's so much money. And it's like, slow down.
Yeah. So we need to manage cash flow. And, we mentioned taxes. I'm working with another client who's about to sell his business for $30 million. He's a partner, and we're trying to figure out the best ways for him to either defer or reduce his capital gains tax.
Right.
There are a few strategies that are available, right? But they all involve giving up the capital for a certain amount of time.
Yes.
So that you have to think about it. Is
right,
it worth?
Right. You can't get the money and not pay the tax.
No.
They figured that one out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they forget that. They're like, I'm getting $1 million, and they realize, no, I'm only getting 700 net. It's not enough. So how do I add value? Well, if you're 3 to 5, 7 years out, we can work to create these value drivers so that you become exit ready.
I think it's relevant too to think about the fact that, for a lot of franchisees, it's common that the term of the franchise agreement is 10 years, right? And so a lot of franchisees, if they are entrepreneurially minded, like most are, a lot of them may decide to sell their business. Maybe, some of them I've had where, they sell in year 4, some of them sell but more commonly they'll sell like year 7, year 8. They've had their fun, they enjoyed the concept, but they're not going to make it, their life's work. They're not going to buy more outlets. Year 6, how would you advise them? What should they be thinking about in terms of timing?
Well, the same thing. I mean, it really comes down to what's the value of your business, right? How much money do you have on your balance sheet to produce the income that you're going to want? Is the value of the business going to be able to do that for you? But a lot of times, people are not ready to retire. No. Most entrepreneurs, are entrepreneurs at heart.
Yep.
And they're not going to sit by the pool and play tennis and golf and dominoes.
No, they're always buzzing with some new idea.
They're always coming up with something else. So,
Well, the rule of thumb I heard about setting and getting your business ready to sell is at least 2 years. Now,
I would, to be organized.
You've got to get the book straightened out so that most people can understand it. And they say it's going to take at least 2 years. And you mentioned something about when do you start planning, and you said when you open your business. And I'm going to quote Stephen Covey here and say, you begin with the end in mind for everything you do in business, and you should be good.
Well, Ray, I agree with you. And there are other factors involved. So the earlier you start, the better, because, an owner or someone going to buy the business, may want to have their key employees go with them. So we need to start thinking about how do you lock in some of your key employees that you can't lose, that add value to the business, such that they don't leave. And so putting together, non-qualified deferred compensation plans, providing them with ways to be able to make sure that their key employees don't leave upon the transfer of the business when the owner's not there anymore. There needs to be certain incentives involved to make them want to stay, at least for the transition or for a couple more years for the new.
And I've seen those in all different, types and forms. We could probably have a whole session just on that. But, we're so glad that you were able to join us today.
Thank you.
Tell everyone your contact information so they can reach out to you.
Sure. My email address is mringel @strategiesforwealth. That's forwealth.com. And my phone number is 917-734-4748. And, if anybody, feel free to call me. There's no cost to a conversation, and, find out about you and your business, and, share with you some ideas, and we can go from there.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much. We really appreciate all your insights today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Ray.
Hey, franchise owners. How's your local marketing? Do you feel like you could use some help keeping up with your social media posts and comments and reviews? Do you wonder if you could be doing more to attract local customers? Are you able to identify new move-ins to your local area? At Westvine, we help franchisees like you reach more local customers through digital marketing. With daily monitoring, creative content, and ad placement, and customer data intelligence, we'll get your business in front of the people who want your products or services. We also work with franchisors who need an agency to handle the digital marketing for all of their locations. If you're ready to reach more local customers, give us a call at 805-265-5440 or visit us at westvine.com. That's 805-265-5440 or westvine.com.
Jerry, you're back.
I am here, Kristin. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. We've been looking for you.
Oh, man, it's been crazy, Kristin. You know, I've been busy. I've been all over the country. This franchise life is just nuts sometimes.
That it is. But I know you've got some great news for us out of DC.
You know, every time we go to DC, now this was with the International Franchise Association. It's the annual leadership conference and fly-in. So you spend a couple days in educational things related to what's going on in the franchising world. And then you spend a day on the Hill in pre-scheduled appointments with your representatives and senators. And it's always amazing. This year was interesting, Kristin, because there just wasn't a lot of really critical stuff we needed to talk about this year, partially because, you know, we fought a lot of battles in the last year and everything's kind of just in a status type situation right now. So not a lot. We had a couple big asks that we want them to take a look at, but it was amazing, you know, hanging out with some of the best franchisees and franchisors in the nation is always wonderful. And this was no different. So I want more people to come to it next year.
Well, I did investigate it actually, as a matter of fact. And, you know, I will say for any franchisees or potential franchisees out there listening, you know, I've been a member of IFA for several years, but I never really done anything until this past year when I went to San Diego. And then, well, to be quite honest, I just got jealous that you kept going to DC. So I'm like, well, what the heck is going on in DC? And I'm like, oh my God, I totally could have gone to that. That would have been a great event for me to be at. And I would have really learned a lot and been able to actually talk to some of these representatives who, by the way, have been in office for far too long and say, hey, like, what are you doing here? You know, I would have loved that time. So for people out there who are listening, it is not too late to get involved. It's not too late to join IFA. And the Franchise Action Network is another great place to be involved. So tell us, what are some of the great things that you brought home from that meeting? Sure.
So the two big asks we had this year, it's every 10 years, they review the FTC rule regarding the FTDs or FDDs that we all live and breathe by. And it's coming up. And there have been some proposed changes to it that, in our opinion, are not necessary and frankly will make it much more difficult on franchisors. And that will end up making it much more difficult on franchisees. So basically, we asked them to, of course, consider our offer and just take a look at it and see, because it's been working for like 40 years. It works great. We just need it to be left alone. You know, and one of the arguments is that there's not enough protection for franchisees. And yet IFA just did a study, and like 96% of the franchisees are still in love with their franchise system, think they got everything they were looking for and then some. So a lot of times these rules or potential rules are driven by a handful of people who, in many cases, may just not be happy with the decision they made, and they need another avenue to follow to try and get some compensation or something. So we asked if they would leave it alone. It seems as though they're leaning that way. So hopefully that goes very well. And the other ask that we had, it hits me close to home. Certainly there's probably, I would say, tens of thousands of other franchise owners out there that are in the same situation. We, during the recovery from the COVID pandemic, we were approved for the ERTC, which was the Employee Retention Tax Credit, for several months. In fact, if you were approved for the third quarter, then you were automatically approved for the fourth quarter. Well, in the fourth quarter, they decided they wanted that money for something else. So they said, just kidding, franchisees.
Right.
We're going to take it back from you and you don't get that money. Well, us and again, tens of thousands of other business owners had already given raises to employees, done some other things like we were supposed to do to retain employees, already spent the money, and then they took it back. So the second ask was to put that back into play. To anybody who had been pre-approved for that should get it because they had made decisions based on that. Everybody was in favor of it. Unfortunately, there's no money for it. So the only way that gets approved if it's attached to the end of year spending bill that they're still trying to hash out, and there'll be 1,000 different pet projects that are trying to be attached to that. So we don't know what's going to happen. There is some optimism, but no guarantees. But the bottom line is the optimism keeps me optimistic, and I think they hear what we've got to say, and there's some real potential in it coming into play. So good stuff.
I have to say, voting day is right around the corner. And so anybody who owns a small business or anybody who has a franchise, these are kind of issues that we need to be looking up before we go and cast our vote, because, unfortunately, a lot of these people sitting in these seats of power are getting filthy rich. We're little business people who are out here doing the right thing for the economy, for our employees, for their families, and to then have money pulled back. It's not like they're giving up their paychecks, but we're asked to give up our employees' paychecks and the money that we were promised. So, I would just encourage everybody, again, I'm not a political person, but I'll tell you, I'm tired of seeing these guys go on and collect their checks and then screw the business people. That's just not right.
Well, the bottom line, you guys talked about inflation and recession and things like that early on, and everybody's fighting that battle. And when you make a business plan several months or even a year in advance based on a certain amount of revenue or income from other sources, anything that happens that changes that, whether you cause it or your representatives do, it really puts a strain on businesses. And there were a lot of stories in DC about businesses that have failed because they didn't get that Q4 money. So for them it'll be too late, but hopefully for the rest of us it's in play. But Kristin, the best news came. We make a lot of noise when we're in DC. There were 400 franchisees and franchisors on the Hill all in the same day talking to their reps. Well, there had been some conversation in the background about a bill that is now just today got presented for consideration. And it is going to deal with joint employer. We've been fighting that bogeyman for a dozen years or longer. Depending on who's in power, it either comes back or it goes away or it comes back or whatever. We can see what it has done to places like California. There has been anything that's happened relating to that employee-employer relationship. And so I'm going to read this list of senators because I think it's important we know who, at least on this one, are working for us. Senator Angus King brought this forth today. Senators Manchin, Sinema, Lankford, Tillis, Collins, and Cornyn actually are pushing it. And it is going to create a barrier between franchisees and franchisors when it's related to the relationship with employees. And really what it says is a trademark, which is what we as franchisees buy, right? It's a trademark. A trademark may not be considered as establishing a relationship between a franchisor and a franchisee relating to their employees. So they're trying to go beyond a committee ruling, which is a part of the Labor Department relating to joint employer, and say, we as Congress understand the franchisee-franchisor relationship, and there will be no established relationship relating to employees. So we are in hopes that this goes through. That was really good news. Frankly, we've got some pretty strong people that are attached to this thing. So if they can get some votes in place, we know that the people we talked to last week were in favor of anything they could do to deal with the joint employer situation. So that was positive. I will keep you apprised on all of those things in the shows coming up.
Excellent. And I hope you get Grassley in check on that since he's your guy.
Grassley's easy. Grassley's easy. You know, he was a farmer, which is a small business. So anything related to small businesses, he goes, this is common sense. This is logic. Let's just get it done and move on.
Exactly. So we got to get all these guys on the same page. That's great news, Jerry. And I hope to see that happens.
Last piece, because Fred's going to ask if we don't deal with it. You know, Fred always wants to know, is this a good time for people to look at a franchise system? I saw massive amounts of positive vibes from franchisees and franchisors in DC. There's a lot of really positive things. Yes, staffing is an issue in particular in food service, but it certainly impacts the rest of us. But overall, it's still a very positive time to look at that. The relationship in success in a franchise system as opposed to non-franchise businesses is still actually growing as we go into a recession.
Right. I think that's awesome. And, a lot of that was we had talked about with Mike as well. And I want to say one quote that I found on their website, Strategies for Wealth. It's just something to kind of keep in mind, and to the same point you're making about it being a good time. And their quote said, it's to live past yourself. Mm-hmm. Right. And we talk a lot about building that legacy. And I think that that's really a great quote that really helps define what franchising is about and how you can build a future for your family. So, Mike, again, thanks for being on the show and for having that on your website. It really made me stop and think today when I looked at that.
Thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Awesome.
Kristin, great as always. I look forward to next week. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jerry, for all you do.
As usual, thank you for joining Pillars of Franchising. We appreciate every single one of you. We want to give a shout out to our sponsors, the Titus Center for Franchising at Palm Beach Atlantic University. You can find them on the college's website. Also, Franchise Show 247, which can be found at franchiseshow247.com. We couldn't do without our sponsors, and we appreciate their support. Don't forget, we'd love to have calling guests. Our number to call in is 323-580-5755. That is 323-580-5755. If you have questions for our guest or for any of our $1 Million mentors, we welcome you to call in at any time on the show. We will do our very best to answer your calls. Stay tuned. More coming up.
Wow, that logo looks great, doesn't it?
It does.
I love it. So, Laura, you and I are going to have a little chat. What are we talking about this afternoon?
Well, I mean, whatever you think is on your mind, but I'm happy to talk about anything related to franchising and their financial questions and how, they're evaluating kind of some of these topics that we were talking about with Mike.
Well, I think it's really interesting, actually, and I appreciate you bringing it to the forefront when we talk about, the same things we've always stolen from Covey again and again and again, as beginning with the end in mind, right? And we tend to beat that drum often, but it's because it's really so important. And when I work with clients who want to buy a franchise, I mean, those are that's at the crux of everything, because if I don't know where somebody wants to be in 5 or 10 years, it's really hard to help them find the right model that's going to fit that. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a good thing. And I really enjoyed you and Mike talking about some of the different funding opportunities, because that tends to be one of the real big issues that people have, is the fear of not having money, or where do I get money?
Absolutely. And I think that, I learned something new about the disability, lump sum, funding.
Yes.
I think that's a really great option that I'll have to keep in mind when I'm advising clients in the future. But the life insurance policies are out there. I won't mince words that the policies can be costly if the parties are older, right? Because as we all get older, right, there is an increased risk that we might pass away. So there's more risk to the insurance company that they would have to pay, and how that's going to play out. But it is still a much better deal than trying to come up with $500,000, $1 million, whatever it is.
Even more.
Yeah, even more, whatever
Yeah.
it may be. Mhm.
We there's some things we could talk about offline, but there are ways to use, depending on how big the policy is and like how old they are. I mean, we can use premium financing. There are ways to be able to use other people's money to finance the policies, right? And be able to do that. The other thing I can share with you is we implement a unique strategy. We set up what we call an insurance LLC, right? Where the business owners, let's say there are multiple owners, right? If you have 3, 4, 5 owners, you don't want to be buying policies on everybody, right? What you do is we create an insurance LLC that owns all the insurance. It owns the disability insurance, it owns all the life insurance, so that there's just one policy per person.
Right.
And an agreement, and the business owners actually own it. They own the LLC, and that's how we designed and set it up. This way, it's pretty easy and simple. But and the other thing you mentioned, it was the disability buyout insurance. It's actually really not that expensive when you look into it. And it'd be more than happy to share with you, some ideas on how to use it effectively.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. We've been talking around here about how do you, most people who are getting ready to buy or invest in a franchise are at a point where they've kind of done their thing. And this is the exception to all of our Gen Zs out there, right? Most of them don't have grown children yet, right? But there's a lion's share of people who have children who are about to go off to college, or they've gone off to college, and there's multiple demands on what money they do have. And so it's really important to understand, what funding sources you have out there, what you have available to you to purchase and invest in these businesses. So,
Sure.
I'm sorry.
No, I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to work with someone like Mike, find a wealth strategist, somebody, not just an accountant always each and every time, is poised and educated in all of these different options, nor are they necessarily somebody that is familiar with, say, franchising in general. So
that's really important. I mean, there's a lot of really qualified folks out there, but it doesn't mean that, the person who's been a good resource for, your family while you guys have, 2 W-2 jobs and
Right.
you just kind of, regular earnings, that may not be the right CPA when you have your own business.
Sure.
I'll share some stories. So what my experience working with accountants is, most of them just record history, right? What did you do this year? What did you do? There's really nothing you can do with taxes, and see you again next year.
Right.
There are a couple that are entrepreneurial who just happen to be in the accounting business. And so it's amazing to me. So for example, you could set up a 401k profit sharing for your company to save for retirement. But most business owners don't know, and most accountants don't even know how to implement what they call cash balance plans or defined benefit plans, where I have business owners putting away 6 figures a year,
right,
getting huge tax deductions. So moving money from the business to their personal world. The doctor practice I work with, the doctors were putting away, $150 to $200 a year and giving away this amount to the employees.
Yep.
And it was just amazing. And their accountant never told them about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Basically just said, fund your 401k.
Right. Well, and I want to make sure that people understand, as we are talking about these things, this is why we recommend that you work with somebody who's a professional in the industry, right? Obviously here at Pillars of Franchising, we try to keep a list of all these professionals that we've talked to, people that we've vetted, that we trust, we understand, that have the know-how to help you get set up with the right stuff to be successful, especially financially. And, Ray and I have talked about it before, and Jerry mentioned it too. You should always be ready for that rainy day, right? Because you never know when, I open my business, recession hit, right? And the next thing we're all screaming along and COVID comes to town. So, there's a lot of things that can happen, and working with somebody who helps you plan ahead and plan for rainy days really is a great idea. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yes, Michael, and thanks for being on our show today. Please be sure to like, share, and comment on this episode as well as any other that you might like.
Sure.
And thank you to Jerry Akers, Ray Pillar, our $1 Million mentors, Laura Liss, our franchise attorney, and Fred McMurray and Elizabeth Denham, our producers. I'm Kristin Selmeczy, and together we are your resource for franchising success. This has been Pillars of Franchising, and remember that your dream starts here. Have a great day.